Back in 2009, Capcom released the fifth mainline Resident Evil game, introducing new characters alongside the old ones and putting an end into Wesker's story. The game itself is a really high-quality game. I even believe that the graphics and controls can even compete with nowadays games, though many fans consider Resident Evil 5 to be the game that the franchise started to fall apart, since it leaned towards action even more. But one thing that you have to keep in mind is that Resident Evil 5 took Resident Evil 4's formula and tweaked it a little bit in order to add more action. The trailers back in the days hyped fans a lot by showing Jill Valentine's grave, and it actually sold very well. It sold over 12 million copies. But the thing that disappointed me after I compiled these info is what Resident Evil 5 was gonna be. Just like many games, Resident Evil 5 had some things that didn't make to the retail version. At the end of this video, you'll be familiar with the original version of Resident Evil 5 and will be able to compare it to the final cut. But before getting to that, something really quick. If you are a Resident Evil fan and end up enjoying this video, then please make sure to check my channel out, because I'm sure you're gonna love the content. And also links to my social media like Instagram and Discord server are in the description. Consider checking them out if you're interested. Now let's get into the video. Of all the things that were cut from Resident Evil 5, let us start off by talking about the things that would have affected the gameplay directly. Weapons. Back in E3 2007, there were so many things shown in Resident Evil 5, but in this trailer specifically, we can see 3 weapons that Chris carries. The first weapon seems to be an M1911 sidearm. But this is not just that. It looks like the weapon has been fairly modified and customized. Simply by looking at it from this view, you can see that it has a laser attached to the underbarrel. Plus, shown here, we can see that the grips are wooden. This was obviously changed, and there were no sign of the 1911 in the retail version. Instead, we were one more introduced to the good old Breda 92F, and as expected, the design is relatively similar to the 1911 shown in the trailers. And as you were expecting, the main handgun in Resident Evil 5 can barely shake dust from zombies at the beginning. The second weapon shown in the trailers is a shotgun, but the shotgun that made it to the final cut is a bit different. As seen here, the overall look of the shotgun has changed, plus the place that the laser was attached to. At the end, we were presented with Ithaca 37, but the only thing is that it had no stock, which led the weapon to having a relatively high recoil. And now about the shotgun shown in the trailers. The shotgun itself did make it to the game, though not as a usable weapon. Actually, we can see it blurred in the background of the item shop. The third weapon shown in the trailers is an assault rifle. It's hard to say what the weapon actually is in that chaos of the trailer. But one thing that we can say for sure is that SIG-556 was based on this weapon. Simply by comparing these two, we can say that both have same attachments, laser sights on the side and the additional holographic sight on the top rail. Characters. A merchant. Apparently, at some point, Resident Evil 5 was gonna have a merchant named Marchant, and since Resident Evil 5 worked just like Resident Evil 4, this Marchant would have probably functioned just like the merchant from Resident Evil 4. I assume the Marchant in Resident Evil 5 was gonna be the guy that gives Chris and Sheva their main weapons at the very beginning, who is executed later on. The idea of a merchant was actually cut, and instead, we got the item shop menu. Though Barry Burton is not in a campaign, it's mentioned that as you play solo as Chris, Barry Burton and Jill would back up Chris at some certain points, but this was cut and he appeared in Mercenaries Reunion instead. Also in the 5th mission, at the fight with El Gigante, BSAA would back Chris up, but this was cut later on. Wesker. Comparing Wesker to other characters, we can say that he had relatively more noteworthy things to talk about. In the DLC of Resident Evil 5, where you inspect the mansion once more as Chris and Jill. At the end, you meet Wesker, but here is where Jill sacrifices herself and jumps out of the window with Wesker. Originally, she would have stabbed him in the eye and making him use a prosthetic eye after that. The weapon that Wesker carries in the 7-minute fight with Jill is actually a Desert Eagle from Resident Evil 5, but originally he had his own samurai edge, the Wesker model. Wesker's original design was something similar to Code Veronica, but it was changed to a carbon fiber material. But before going further, something really quick. If you have come so far and are actually enjoying this video, then please make sure to subscribe to my channel, cause I'm sure you're gonna love the content. Now let's move on. Excella, mostly referred to as the worst character, Excella was originally a secretary for Trisel and the CEO was gonna be a male character. Since she is now a CEO, her appearance was changed and originally this was her first look, a business suit. And it's mentioned that her business suit was reused as Sheva's alternate costume. Early in the original storyline, she would have captured Sheva and then is killed by a tyrant as Wesker orders the tyrant. Sheva. As said earlier, at some point at early stages, Sheva was gonna be captured by Excella and then rescued by Chris, and also instead of a playable character and also a partner, she was going to be just an NPC who helps Chris along the game. Jill Valentine. Jill lastly appeared in Resident Evil 5, but this time she is brainwashed to Wesker. But originally, as shown in the trailers, she was going to be rescued by Chris as she is found in a capsule at Trisel. As mentioned earlier, she was gonna help Chris along Barry at some certain points. There is something really interesting to talk about. Jill's death was planned in the game if you do some certain things. So this means that the game was planned to have multiple endings. At the final fight in the volcano, Chris, Sheva and Jill would have teamed up on an aircraft and they would have fired missiles at Wesker, which was changed to Chris and Sheva killing Wesker off with rocket launchers. Now about the things that I'm sure you will all get disappointed after hearing. As shown in the trailers, Resident Evil 5 was originally gonna be single player, some sort of solo play just like Resident Evil 4, and you would play as Chris. And also shown in the trailers, at some points Chris would fight zombies, which means T-Virus was in this game. Also Chris was gonna get separated from Sheva by falling into a pit, which was going to be an Umbrella's waste facility. In addition to that, there was a desert level, which was then cut from the game since it was frustrating to walk through and the zombies would have only been spawned by rising out of the sand, which means there were sand zombies. It's also worth mentioning that in this desert level, there was a shipwreck where you would meet the merchant. Now let's compare the trailer to the final retail version. The first thing that you notice is Chris's voice actor.
Casualties continue to mount over the long years I have struggled. More and more I find myself wondering if it's all worth fighting for.
I don't know who he is, but I kind of feel that he is Paul Mercier from Resident Evil 4, who also did the voice acting for Leon Kennedy and the Merchant. And I kind of feel that his voice is actually in the game. I kind of feel that Resident Evil 5 from the beginning is Paul Mercier from Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 5.
The first time that a human gets infected is also shown in the trailer. Both scenes actually look the same, but the only difference is that Sheva is absent. Shown here looks like the game was going to have a dodging mechanism, and the executioner is not who we are all familiar with, and is actually the Chainsaw Man from the 3rd chapter. We have talked about the weapons enough, but the new thing is that the Maginis here had some ropes, and they would have probably used that rope to climb up things. And the final thing is Resident Evil 5's logo. And that'll do it for what Resident Evil 5 was gonna be. These were the things that didn't make to the final retail version of the game. Let me know what you think about them. If you do know any extra ones, please make sure to comment them down below. And if you have come so far and enjoyed this video, then please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. The support on the channel has been great and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. And by the way, links to my social media is down in the description. Consider checking them out if you're interested. And as always, thanks for watching.